Okay, so bone from the biomechanical perspective. So, molecular structure. Generally, it's highly specialized connective tissue. We consider the bone as a composite. Why the composite? Because it's created from the collagen that is a polymer and it's symmetric phase, and a hydroxyapatite that is a reinforcement phase. So hydroxyapatite is a ceramic material. So what properties has the ceramic materials? The ceramic materials are very stiff, yes, but brittle. And what has the sorry? And what are the properties of the polymers? Polymers are tough, but are not stiff. Yes. So combining those two things, we have a stiff and tough substance, generally speaking. And the bones are like that. Yes. You would not say that the bone is very brittle. Yes. Honestly, we can consider bone brittle because when it fractures in a brittle type. Yes, but if you think about how many times in your life you had, for example, kicked something with your finger. Yes, imagine now that this was created from some ceramic material like a plate. Yes, it would get to million pieces at the first time you hit anything during your life or jumped or done something like that. And the bones holds, yes. So they are really good in sustaining stresses and strains, although their reinforcement phase is ceramic. How is it possible? We'll get to it in a moment. Okay, about this, we'll get it. So, this picture I like. So, how it is possible? Generally, as you can see, bone crystals are very small. And we have already read before, ceramics are so brittle because the molecules inside cannot rearrange themselves. Yes, so they cannot rearrange themselves, and any weakness points will stay in place. So the strain would accumulate in the points of weaknesses in some imperfections, and it would break. And then this fracture would propagate through whole of the crystal and destroy it. This is how it works. But now imagine that in case of the crystals in the bone, this situation does not have to happen. Yes, those crystals are separated by the collagen molecules. And those crystals are small. The smaller the crystal, the easier it is to get the crystals with small amounts of imperfections. So we have small divided from themselves crystals. And those crystals, when one crystal would break, when the fracture would, when the one, at least small amount of those crystals would be destroyed, it does not mean always that all of the bone would fracture. Yes. Okay. Of course, we are looking from the microscopic perspective. From the microscopic perspective, it's a bit different, and we'll get to it. But from this microscopic perspective, it is very important that those crystals are separated. And as you can see, we can call that the bone is a lamellar composite because the bone, the ceramic and the collagen is organized in the layers generally. Maybe not ideally, but something like that. And as you can see also that there are a lot of levels of those organizations. In this picture on the right, those lines are also very important. Those lines shows us where is the highest density of this reinforcement phase in the bone. And those lines are not the coincidence. Those lines shows us how the forces are applied to the bones. And those lines of forces are identical with the positions and the orientations of the higher density of the bone. Because the bone is also a living organ. It's also living tissue. So it reacts to all of these stresses and it gets stronger where it needs. So it doesn't get stronger everywhere simultaneously. It gets stronger only in those places which are stressed and only on those planes that are stressed. That is also explaining us why it's so important to put some weight on the bone, why it's so important to exercise, for example, and not to lay in bed. Well, I'm talking about the patients, as ill patients, if it's possible, obviously. Because stressing the bone is the most important thing that leads to its reorganization and strengthening. Yes, so we need to stress a bone in order to make it strong. That's a very important concept. Okay, and this is one more time showing it. So, how these compressive groups and tensile groups are organized in order to sustain weight. Because if you imagine that the weight gets on the head of the femur from above, you can guess that forces would generally look like those lines of the trabecula. Okay. So, it is also, this picture is also important. So, generally, the bone is the best in sustaining normal normal stresses, yes? So, top down, generally speaking. But it's far worse in when the force is from side. And a lot of fractures are happening in such mechanism. So the bone is strong in the planes that is used to be stressed generally. And when we are walking, for example, we are stressing the bone top down. Yeah. And generally bones are organized in order to sustain pressure in the longitudinal axis and not in the transverse axis, because the reinforcement phase is organized like so. And this is very important because it's extremely characteristic for the composites. Composites behaves differently depending on from which side we are loading them. Other materials behaves the same, not depending on the side. Imagine that you have a stone, yes? You would try to crack it, and the stone would be as strong from every side, yes? It doesn't matter from which side you would try to crack it, it would be as strong from each side. But in case of the bone and composites, it's not true. Yep. Okay, it's also important to know about one more thing. We talked about the viscoelastic properties. You have read that we have something called the fatigue fractures, and generally the fatigue of the material. It is caused by the accumulation of the thousands upon thousands of imperfections in the material. And these imperfections would increase generally. So you know that, for example, when we have a car that is 40 years old and is riding on the same metal suspension, for example, it would rather not sustain it. Yes? It is hard to imagine the car suspension to be in good shape for so much time without any repairs. Yes, but our bodies can sustain it, and far more than 40 years in quite good shape. How it is possible? It is possible because we are not having the same bones for 40 years or longer. It's because our bones are always remodeling. Those imperfections, yes, are accumulating in our crystals, yes, especially in hydroxyapatite. But those crystals are constantly destroyed and recreated, destroyed and recreated. Where are they recreated and where are they destroyed depends mainly on how the bone is stressed. So where these stress planes are. But all the time, through whole of our lives, our bones are constantly destroyed and recreated, destroyed and recreated, and this is very good because of it, you have constantly new bones. We are constantly, our body is constantly reducing the risk of fracture. Yes, because it's making the bone good. Generally speaking. Okay, thank you very much. It's enough.